Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Abdul Muiz. I am the author of the research, and the research title is Empirical and Numerical Validation of Sand Running Technique for Cohesionless Soil. And the co-authors are Engineer Binish Jehan Khan, Waliullah, and Irfan Jamil. So the contents include in this presentation is introduction about the topic, apparatus used in this topic is its fabrication and calibration, and we will discuss some practical testing, and same practical testing will be also modeled numerically, and then the results will be compared and discussed. So first thing that come in mind is that what is basically sand drying technique and how it works. So it's basically a simple process but quite a significant one. It involves the pouring of sand from a certain height and certain falling velocity. Let's keep these two things in mind, certain height and certain velocity. So next thing that come in mind is that why we have to use sand drying technique. So as you all know that because of its non-plastic behavior, cohesionless soil which is sand, these sand samples are carried to the laboratory for certain testings, but in its natural state it is impossible because of its non-plastic behavior. So most of the geotechnical researchers, it is quite convenient in their small scale geotechnical testing. For example, they are wanting to record the response of piles and pile rafts and raft sharing capacity, these things. Sand mining technique can be achieved through various methods and apparatus, but the apparatus we are using was developed by Khari et al. In 2014, which is known as mobile Pluviator. So now coming to the parts of mobile Pluviator. So on the right hand side you can see the whole picture of this whole assembly. It is known as a mobile Pluviator, and it's sand hopper, this funnel type thing that contains the sand. It's movable in x-axis, y-axis. Also its height is adjustable in the z-axis, which is adjusted by the steel frame which is provided on the boundaries. So keep in mind that pluviation is the movement of the sandhopper in the xy plane. Just in xy plane is 2D movement, it is known as pluviation. So let's take a detailed look on the parts of the pluviator. So first of all, it has a steel profile which is used to hold the sandhopper, and then this is sandhopper, the funnel type thing that contains the sand. Also on the end of the funnel, a wooden shutter which is a porous disc is also attached, from which the sand is coming out as a sand jet, and it is used to control the rate of fall. And there are three types of sieve. Usually these sieves are of number 4 size, and it is used for distribution, uniform distribution of the falling sand which is coming out of jet. And there is a H. H and F are the heights, but F is a fixed height which is from topmost sieve to the wooden shutter, and H is basically adjustable, which is from the bottom of the sieve to the container, in container in which the sand rain is falling. So the first step of this whole research was to fabricate a mobile pluviator which is not available locally, so that we have to make it locally. So this, as you can see in picture, and this mobile pluviator is created for the purpose of sand draining technique. Procedure for calibration is also quite easy, but first of all, let's focus on the term calibration. What is calibration basically? Let's assume from which height I can get which density. So these whichs are answered by the calibration. So calibration involves first take an empty container of any shape or size. Usually we use cylindrical mode of 6-inch dia and 6-inch height. Fill that container from falling sand and weight the container which is filled with sand. So that weight divided by volume of that container will give you a density. So repeat this from different heights. First of all 6-inch, then 12-inch, then 18-inch, and etc. etc. And use that density, corresponding densities, for finding relative densities. The formula of relative density is given where the minimum and maximum dry unit weight. These are obtained from ASTM specified standard tests, but in the field we will get gamma D, which is mass of container filled with sand divided by volume of container, as I talked about earlier. So with the help of calibration, the relationship between relative density and height of fall is obtained for the shutter having hole size of 13 mm and 10 mm respectively. As you can see that initially the relative density increases with increased height, but after reaching a certain height the relative density became constant. So this is called that constant terminal velocity is achieved, because after achieving terminal velocity the further increase of height does not increase the relative density. For the validation of sand draining technique, a plate load test was selected, which is quite simple and usually used for bearing capacity calculation, but here we will use it for the settlement analysis in order to obtain the load settlement curve. So the practical testing was conducted on the relative densities of 45% and 60%, which has been obtained by filling the container through a mobile Pluviator, and the settlement was recorded using the LVDT and data logger. Load settlement curve was obtained for the both densities and are given in the figure. As you can see that for 45% relative density the settlement was higher, and for 60% the settlement was relatively lower. The same plate load test with the same conditions was also modeled numerically using the software of Plaxis 3D, and the load settlement curves are given in the figure, in which also the settlement of the loose sand is higher than the settlement of the medium sand. In each relative density condition, the both experimental and numerical load settlement curves were smoothed and compared, and showed a good similarity both visually and in the values as well. But it had to be keep in mind that numerical settlement values was higher than the empirical, and the little bit of difference between these graphs may be arise due to experimental errors. The difference between the maximum settlement values in both experimental and numerical are given in the table as well as their difference. As we can see that in loose percent it is 8.21%, and in medium sand it is 14.11%. In loose it is less than 10%, which is good, and in medium it is less than 15%, which is acceptable according to most of the research of the same natures in which the experimental and numerical values are compared. So all of the above findings validate the efficiency of the sand running technique, and it is a confident building measure that a person can proceed towards a complex testings in the laboratory. Many thanks for your attention. If you have any question, you feel free to ask.